In 2004, something happened at St. Mary's Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio that would haunt the medical community for years. 11 patients died in a span of 3 weeks. All records were systematically erased. This is what one nurse discovered when she refused to stay silent. If hospital stories like this keep you up at night, hit that like button and subscribe to Ward 13. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. Now, let's get into Sarah's story. Sarah Mitchell had been a night shift nurse at St. Mary's Hospital for 7 years when she noticed something was wrong. It was March 23, 2004, at 2:47 a.m., and she was doing her rounds on the 4th floor, the cardiac care unit. Mrs. Eleanor Pembroke, 68 years old, bed 4C, had been stable all evening. Post-operative from a routine valve replacement, her vitals were textbook perfect. Sarah had checked on her at 2:15 a.m. Pulse, 72. Blood pressure, 118/76. Oxygen saturation, 98%. The monitors showed consistent, healthy rhythms. 32 minutes later, Eleanor was dead. Sarah stood in the doorway of room 4C, her hand still on the light switch, trying to process what she was seeing. The cardiac monitor was flatlining, but there was no alarm. The sound had been muted. Eleanor lay in her bed, eyes half open, her skin already taking on that waxy pallor Sarah had seen too many times before. But something was different. Wrong. The 4-line had been disconnected, not pulled out by a confused patient, but carefully, deliberately removed and taped to the bed rail. The morphine pump was still running, but the tube led nowhere. And on the bedside table, Eleanor's chart sat open to a page that shouldn't have existed, a page with handwritten notes that Sarah didn't recognize. Sarah. Dr. Robert Chen appeared behind her, his white coat still pristine despite the late hour. He was the night attending, a skilled cardiologist who'd been at St. Mary's for 12 years. "What are you doing standing in the dark?" "Dr. Chen, Mrs. Pembroke is—" "I know." His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. "I've already called it. Time of death, 2:43 a.m. Natural causes. Post-operative complications." Sarah turned to face him. "But I just checked on her 30 minutes ago. She was fine. And look at the 4 it's been." "Sarah." Dr. Chen stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The soft click of the latch sounded impossibly loud in the darkness. Mrs. Pembroke was 68 years old with a history of heart disease. "These things happen. You know that." The monitor was muted. Sometimes patients find the beeping stressful. It's not uncommon for family members to. She had no visitors tonight. "I was at the nurses' station the entire shift. Nobody came to this floor except staff." Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Sarah felt something shift. The air in the room seemed to thicken. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "I need you to trust me, Sarah. Document this as natural causes. Post-operative cardiac arrest. I've already notified the family and administration. The paperwork is straightforward." But the 4 was probably disconnected during her final moments. Patience thrash. "You know this." He moved past her to the bed and, with practiced efficiency, began removing the monitoring equipment. "Go finish your rounds. I'll handle the rest." Sarah watched him work, her mind racing. In 7 years, she'd never seen Dr. Chen act like this. Cold. Mechanical. Almost rehearsed. She left the room but didn't go far. Instead, she slipped into the supply closet across the hall and waited, watching through the crack in the door. Dr. Chen emerged from room 4C 15 minutes later carrying Eleanor's chart. He didn't head to the nurses' station to file it. Instead, he turned left, toward the administrative wing. At 3:30 a.m., the administrative wing should have been empty. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She waited 5 minutes, then followed. The administrative corridor was dimly lit, emergency lighting casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Sarah moved quietly, her soft-soled shoes making barely a sound. She could see Dr. Chen ahead, silhouetted against the light spilling from an open door, the medical records room. She shouldn't have been surprised. Doctors accessed files all the time. But at 3:30 in the morning? With a patient chart that should have gone to the nurse's station first? Sarah pressed herself against the wall near the door, listening. The third one this week. That was Dr. Chen's voice. I'm aware. A woman's voice, sharp and authoritative. Sarah recognized it immediately. Patricia Hammond, the hospital's chief operating officer. Have you completed the documentation? Following the same protocol. But Sarah Mitchell was asking questions. A pause. Mitchell? She's been here how long? 7 years. Good nurse. Observant. Too observant. Sarah heard the rustle of papers. We need to be more careful. 11 deaths in 3 weeks will raise flags if anyone connects them. Sarah's blood ran cold. 11 deaths? She'd been aware of a few patients passing. It happened in hospitals. But 11? The insurance auditor is coming next week, Patricia continued. By then, these files need to be clean. No anomalies. No patterns. Understood. Understood. And Mitchell, I'll handle it. Sarah didn't wait to hear more. She turned and walked as quickly as she dared back toward the cardiac unit, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might give her away. Her mind was reeling. 11 deaths. Clean files. Insurance auditor. What the hell was happening at St. Mary's Hospital? Back at the nurse's station, Sarah pulled up the patient database on the computer. Her hands were shaking as she typed, searching for mortality records for the past 3 weeks. But when the results loaded, her stomach dropped. March 1st through March 23, 2004. 4 recorded deaths. All listed as expected outcomes for high-risk patients. But she remembered more. Mr. Peterson in 3B, who'd been recovering well from pneumonia, found dead on March 7th. Jenny Rodriguez, the teenager with appendicitis who should have been discharged, coded unexpectedly on March 12th. Thomas Wright, the construction worker with a broken leg, gone on March 15th. Those weren't in the system. Sarah opened the physical logbook they kept at the desk, the one nurses used for handwritten notes during shift changes. She flipped back to March 1st and started reading. The entries were there. All of them. 11 patients over 3 weeks, each with notes from the attending nurses. But someone had gone through with a blue pen and drawn a single line through each entry. Not enough to make it unreadable, but enough to mark it as, what? An error? A correction? She took out her phone and started photographing the pages. The flash seemed impossibly bright in the quiet corridor, but she didn't stop. Evidence. She needed evidence. Working late, Sarah? She nearly dropped the phone. Dr. Marcus Webb stood behind the nurse's station, a coffee cup in his hand. He was the day shift attending, a friendly face she'd known since she started at St. Mary's. Dr. Webb. You're here early. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check on a few patients before rounds. He glanced at the open logbook. Reviewing cases? Sarah made a split-second decision. Dr. Webb, can I ask you something? Off the record. He set down his coffee cup and leaned against the counter. Of course. Have you noticed anything unusual about patient deaths recently? In the past few weeks. Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Fear? It was gone too quickly for Sarah to identify. What makes you ask? Mrs. Pembroke just died. Room 4C. Dr. Chen said it was natural causes, but something felt wrong. Dr. Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I'm going to give you some advice. Whatever you think you've noticed, forget about it. St. Mary's is a good hospital. People die in hospitals. That's the reality of medicine. But go home. Get some sleep. When you come back for your next shift, focus on the patients you can help." He picked up his coffee cup and started to walk away, then paused. "And Sarah? Be careful who you trust." He disappeared down the corridor, leaving Sarah alone with the logbook, her photographs, and the growing certainty that she'd just uncovered something terrifying. 11 patients were dead. The records were being erased. And everyone seemed to be in on it. The question was, why? Sarah didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour diner 3 miles from the hospital and ordered coffee she didn't drink. Her phone sat on the table in front of her, the photos of the logbook glowing accusingly in the pre-dawn darkness. 11 deaths. 11 names she could remember, even if the digital records were being scrubbed clean. Harold Mitchum, March 2nd. Sandra Lee, March 4th. Thomas Wright, March 7th. Rebecca Stanton, March 9th. Carlos Mendez, March 10th. Jennifer Rodriguez, March 12th. Michael Peterson, March 15th. Ruth Kowalski, March 17th. David Brennan, March 19th. Angela Torres, March 21st. Eleanor Pembroke, March 23rd. She wrote them down on a napkin, her handwriting shaky but determined. 11 people who'd entered St. Mary's Hospital for treatable conditions. 11 people who'd never walked out. At 6:47 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Amanda Clark, another night shift nurse and the closest thing Sarah had to a friend at St. Mary's. "Are you okay? Dr. Chan said you seemed upset about Mrs. P. Want to grab breakfast before you head home?" Sarah stared at the message. Dr. Chen was already managing the narrative, making sure everyone knew Sarah had been upset. Making her look emotional. Unreliable. She typed back, "Actually, yes. Meet me at Joe's Diner on Hamilton Street." 20 minutes later, Amanda slid into the booth across from her, still in her scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Girl, you look like hell. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Amanda's smile faded. "Okay." "The patients we've lost this month. Do you remember them?" "Of course. It's been a rough few weeks." "Why?" Sarah pushed the napkin across the table. "Do you remember all of these?" Amanda scanned the list, her brow furrowing. "Some of them, yeah. Mrs. Stanton, I was there when she coded. And that poor teenager, Jennifer, that one really got to me. But—" She looked up. "Sarah, where are you going with this?" "Look up the mortality database when you get a chance. Check how many deaths are officially recorded for March." "I don't need to look it up. I review the weekly reports. We've had 4 deaths this month, all expected outcomes. It's actually lower than our average. Count the names on that list, Amanda." Amanda's finger moved down the napkin, her lips forming silent numbers. When she reached the bottom, her face had gone pale. 11. 11, Sarah confirmed. "And last night, I overheard Dr. Chen and Patricia Hammond talking about cleaning files before an insurance auditor arrives next week. They mentioned me by name. Said I was asking too many questions." Amanda was shaking her head. No, this is... Sarah, this is insane. What are you suggesting? That the hospital is covering up deaths? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what I heard. You must have misunderstood. Dr. Chan is... He muted Eleanor Pembroke's cardiac monitor. He removed her from the system before her body was even cold. And when I questioned it, he told me to trust him and document it as natural causes. Amanda sat back in the booth, her coffee untouched. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Sarah watched her friend's face cycle through disbelief, confusion, and finally, terrifyingly, recognition. "Oh my God," Amanda whispered. "David Brennan. The patient on the 19th? I was on shift that night. Post-op appendectomy, routine case. 29 years old, no complications. I checked on him at midnight. He was sleeping, vitals perfect. When I came back at 1 a.m. She swallowed hard. He was dead. Just like you described with Mrs. Pembroke. No alarm, for disconnected, and Dr. Chen was already there, already calling it. What did he say the cause was? Pulmonary embolism. Rare but possible complication. I questioned it. I mean, there were no warning signs, but Dr. Chen said sometimes they're asymptomatic until it's too late. He filed the paperwork himself. I never saw the chart again. Sarah leaned forward. Amanda, I think something is very wrong at St. Mary's. And I think people are actively covering it up. But why? What would they gain from hiding patient deaths? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. Amanda grabbed Sarah's wrist across the table. Listen to me. If what you're saying is true, if there's really some kind of cover-up, then you need to be smart about this. These people, whoever they are, they have power. Resources. You can't just walk into the police station with a napkin full of names. So what do? You gather evidence. Real evidence. Medical records, witness statements, physical proof. And you do it carefully, because if they realize what you're doing. Amanda didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Sarah spent the next 3 days preparing. She didn't return to St. Mary's. She called in sick, claiming a stomach flu. Instead, she became a researcher, a detective, a woman possessed. She started with public records. Death certificates were filed with the county, and while they weren't always immediately accessible, she had a friend who worked in the clerk's office. By March 26th, she had copies of the death certificates for all 11 patients. The inconsistencies were immediate and damning. Eleanor Pembroke's death certificate, filed by Dr. Chen, listed cardiac arrest secondary to post-operative complications. But her pre-operative assessment, which Sarah had seen, showed a healthy heart. The surgery had been preventative, low risk. Jennifer Rodriguez, the 17-year-old with appendicitis, cause of death listed as septic shock due to peritonitis. But Sarah had reviewed that case personally. The appendectomy had been performed early, before rupture. There should have been no infection. Thomas Wright, the construction worker, fat embolism from femoral fracture. But Wright's fracture had been simple, clean, set without surgery. Fat embolisms from non-surgical fractures were extraordinarily rare. Every death certificate read like a plausible medical explanation. But when you knew the actual patient histories, they fell apart. Sarah created a spreadsheet. Patient name, age, admission reason, date of death, listed cause, attending physician. Patterns began to emerge. All 11 deaths occurred on night shifts, between midnight and 6 a.m. 8 of the 11 were attended by Dr. Chen at time of death. The other 3 were attended by Dr. Lisa Sharma, another night attending. All 11 patients had been on the 4th or 5th floors, the cardiac and general medical units. And here was the detail that made Sarah's blood run cold. All 11 patients had been insured through the same healthcare network, Medicare Plus, a regional HMO known for aggressive cost-cutting measures. On March 28, Sarah decided to reach out to the patients' families. She started with David Brennan's widow, Michelle, who answered on the 3rd ring. "Mrs. Brennan? My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was one of the nurses caring for your husband at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm so sorry for your loss. There was a pause. Thank you. Is something wrong? Is this about his belongings? No, nothing like that. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about David's care, if you don't mind. It's for a quality review we're conducting. Another pause, longer this time. A quality review? Ms. Mitchell, can I ask you something? Of course. Did my husband's death seem normal to you? Sarah's heart started racing. What do you mean? I mean, I got a call at 2 in the morning saying David had died from a blood clot. But when I got to the hospital, they'd already moved his body. They had paperwork for me to sign, consent forms for cremation, which we'd never discussed. Dr. Chan kept saying we needed to move quickly, that it was standard procedure. Michelle's voice cracked. I didn't even get to see him one last time. They said it wasn't advisable, that it would be too traumatic. Did you consent to the cremation? I was in shock. I didn't know what I was doing. They made it sound like it was the right thing, like it's what David would have wanted. But now... She trailed off. Ms. Mitchell, why are you really calling? Sarah made a decision. Mrs. Brennan, I think something wrong happened to your husband. I think something wrong happened to several patients at St. Mary's. And I'm trying to find out what. The silence that followed was heavy with grief and hope and terror. Tell me what you need, Michelle Brennan finally said. By April 2nd, Sarah had spoken with 6 of the 11 families. What she learned shattered any remaining doubt about what was happening at St. Mary's Hospital. The pattern was identical in every case: unexpected death on night shift, rushed paperwork, aggressive pressure to consent to immediate cremation, and, most disturbing, financial settlements. Ruth Kowalski's daughter, Patricia, had been offered $50,000 by the hospital's legal team within 48 hours of her mother's death. They called it a compassionate settlement, Patricia told Sarah over the phone. Said it was to help with funeral expenses and grief counseling. They made me sign an NDA as part of the agreement. I wasn't even allowed to talk about the circumstances of her death. Sandra Lee's husband, Robert, had received the same offer. So had Carlos Mendez's sister and Michael Peterson's adult children. The hospital was paying families to stay quiet. Sarah sat in her apartment on April 3rd, surrounded by papers, photographs, and a growing sense of dread. She'd built a case, but she still didn't understand the motive. Why was St. Mary's systematically killing patients and covering it up? The answer came from an unexpected source. At 9:47 p.m., Sarah's phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Mitchell. The voice was male, older, with a gravelly quality that suggested too many years and too many cigarettes. My name is Frank Delacroix. I'm an insurance fraud investigator with the Ohio Department of Insurance. I understand you've been asking questions about patient deaths at St. Mary's Hospital. Sarah's blood ran cold. How did you? I've been investigating St. Mary's for 6 months. I know about the 11 deaths in March. I know you've been contacting families. And I know you're in danger. What? Can you meet me tomorrow? There's a coffee shop on Warren Street, the Grindhouse. 10 a.m. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed. The line went dead. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, running through scenarios. This could be a trap. Delacroix could be working with the hospital, setting her up. But if he was real, if he was actually investigating. At 9:30 a.m. the next morning, Sarah parked 3 blocks away from the Grindhouse and walked, checking over her shoulder every few steps. She felt ridiculous, paranoid. But Dr. Webb's words echoed in her mind. Be careful who you trust. Frank Delacroix was exactly what Sarah had imagined. Late 50s, rumpled suit, tired eyes that had seen too much. He sat in a corner booth with 2 coffee cups already on the table. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. Please sit. Sarah slid into the booth. How did you know about me? I've had eyes on St. Mary's since October. When you started making calls to the families, it flagged in my monitoring. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I haven't decided which yet. You said you've been investigating for 6 months. What did you find? Delacroix pulled out a manila folder and opened it carefully. Inside were spreadsheets, financial documents, and photographs. St. Mary's Hospital has been in financial trouble since 2002. They took out massive loans to expand the cardiac unit, but the expansion didn't generate the expected revenue. By 2003, they were facing bankruptcy. I don't understand. What does that have to do with Medicare Plus? Delacroix tapped one of the documents. You noticed that all 11 patients in March were insured through them, correct? Sarah nodded. Medicare Plus operates on a capitation model. The hospital receives a fixed payment per patient per year, regardless of how much care that patient actually needs. If a patient requires extensive treatment, ICU stays, multiple procedures, long-term care, the hospital loses money on them. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying they're killing patients to save money? I'm saying St. Mary's has found a way to eliminate their most expensive patients while avoiding liability. They select individuals who are already hospitalized, already vulnerable. They induce what appears to be a natural medical crisis, cardiac arrest, pulmonary embolism, septic shock, conditions that are plausible given the patient's situation. Then they move fast, cremate the body to eliminate evidence, pay off the families to prevent questions, and scrub the records to avoid patterns. That's murder. That's serial murder. That's also incredibly difficult to prove without bodies to autopsy or comprehensive medical records. Delacroix closed the folder. I've been building a case, but I need more than financial irregularities. I need physical evidence or witness testimony that directly links hospital staff to patient deaths. I have the logbook, Sarah said quickly. The nurse's station log that shows all 11 deaths before they were deleted from the system. I photographed it. That's a start, but it's not enough. It shows discrepancies, but not cause. Defense attorneys would argue clerical errors, miscommunication between departments. We need more. What about the families who signed NDAs? Can they testify? Not without breaking their agreements, which would open them to lawsuits. St. Mary's legal team is very good at what they do. Delacroix leaned forward. Ms. Mitchell, I need you to understand something. The people doing this, Dr. Chen, Patricia Hammond, possibly others, they're not cartoon villains. They've convinced themselves they're making impossible choices in a broken healthcare system. That makes them more dangerous, not less. So what do? You go back to work. You act normal. And you document everything you can. I need you to be my eyes inside St. Mary's, but you have to be careful. If they suspect you're working with me. Dr. Chen already knows I was asking questions about Mrs. Pembroke's death. Delacroix's expression darkened. Then we don't have much time. The insurance audit is scheduled for April 12th. That's 9 days from now. They'll be cleaning house, destroying evidence, making sure everything looks perfect. If we're going to stop this, it has to be before then. How? We catch them in the act. Sarah's stomach dropped. You want me to, what? Wait for them to kill another patient. I want you to identify their next target before they act. These people are methodical. They select patients based on specific criteria: high-cost care, Medicare Plus insurance, limited family involvement. If we can predict who they'll target next and set up surveillance. No. Sarah stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I became a nurse to save lives, not to use patients as bait. And how many more will die if we do nothing? Delacroix's voice was harsh but not unkind. St. Mary's has been doing this for months, maybe longer. March was just when they got sloppy. We stop this now, or they refine their methods and keep killing. Sarah sat back down slowly. She thought about Eleanor Pembroke's half-open eyes. Jennifer Rodriguez, who should have gone home to finish her junior year of high school. David Brennan's widow, who never got to say goodbye. What do I need to do? Delacroix pulled out a small device about the size of a USB drive. This is a digital recorder. It's voice-activated and has 48 hours of storage. Keep it on you at all times. If you overhear anything, conversations, plans, anything suspicious, it'll capture it. And then what? And then you call me immediately. He slid a business card across the table. My direct line. Day or night. Sarah took the recorder and the card, feeling the weight of what she was agreeing to. If they catch me, they won't. You're smarter than they think. And Ms. Mitchell. Delacroix met her eyes. Thank you. What you're doing takes real courage. Sarah left the grindhouse with the recorder in her pocket and returned to her apartment. She had 3 days before her next scheduled shift on April 7th. 3 days to prepare herself for what was coming. She spent those days reviewing every piece of evidence she'd collected, memorizing details, preparing for questions. She practiced acting normal, rehearsing casual conversations in the mirror. She wrote a detailed letter explaining everything she'd discovered and mailed it to her sister in Michigan with instructions to open it only if something happened to her. On April 6th, the night before her return to St. Mary's, Sarah received a text from an unknown number. Welcome back tomorrow, Sarah. We've missed you. Let's talk about your future here. Patricia Hammond. The message was friendly, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Sarah walked through the employee entrance of St. Mary's Hospital at 10:47 p.m. on April 7th, her ID badge clipped to her scrubs, the digital recorder hidden in the pocket of her jacket underneath. The night air was cold, but her hands were sweating. The fourth-floor nursing station looked exactly as she'd left it 2 weeks ago. Amanda was already there, reviewing charts. She looked up when Sarah approached, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of shared knowledge neither could speak aloud. "Welcome back," Amanda said, her voice carefully neutral. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Thanks." Sarah logged into the computer system. "Busy night?" "Not yet. Dr. Chen is making rounds now. He wanted to see you when you arrived." "Of course he did." Sarah found Dr. Chen in the break room, pouring coffee into a paper cup. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, good to see you back. We were worried about you. Just a stomach bug. Nothing serious." "Glad to hear it." He took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. "Patricia Hammond would like to see you before you start your shift." "She's in her office." This was it. The moment Sarah had been dreading. "Now." "She's waiting." Sarah took the elevator to the 3rd floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. The administrative wing was quiet, most offices dark. But Patricia Hammond's door was open, light spilling into the hallway. "Sarah, come in, please." "Close the door." Patricia sat behind her desk, a slim woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing. Behind her, the wall was covered with framed certificates, awards, photographs of Patricia with various local politicians. Sarah sat in the chair across from the desk, her hand unconsciously moving to the recorder in her pocket. She pressed the button through the fabric, feeling the slight vibration that meant it was active. "I wanted to check in with you," Patricia said, her tone warm but her eyes cold. "Dr. Chen mentioned you were upset about Mrs. Pembroke's passing." "That's understandable. You'd been caring for her, and losing patients is never easy. I'm fine. It's part of the job. Of course it is. But I want you to know that St. Mary's takes the well-being of our staff very seriously. If you need to talk to someone, a counselor, a supervisor, we have resources available. I appreciate that, but I'm okay. Really. Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm glad to hear it. Because I'd hate to think you were struggling with the realities of hospital work. Sometimes, when nurses become too emotionally invested in patient outcomes, it can lead to misunderstandings. Sarah forced herself to maintain eye contact. Misunderstandings. About medical decisions. About the inevitability of certain outcomes. About the difference between tragedy and malpractice. Patricia leaned forward slightly. Sarah, you're a good nurse. You have a bright future here. But I need to know that you understand how hospitals work. We lose patients. We make difficult choices. And we trust our physicians to make the right calls, even when those calls are hard to accept. The message was clear. Stay quiet or pay the price. I understand, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Wonderful. Patricia stood, indicating the meeting was over. Then let's put this behind us and focus on providing the best care possible to our patients. Welcome back, Sarah. Sarah returned to the fourth floor, her mind racing. The recording was damning, not quite an admission of murder, but a clear attempt at intimidation and an acknowledgement that there were difficult choices being made. It wasn't enough. Not yet. At 1:23 a.m., Sarah was checking vitals on Mr. Gregory Hartman in room 4B. 72 years old, admitted 3 days ago for pneumonia, insured through Medicare Plus. His condition had been improving, but tonight his chart showed increased oxygen requirements and elevated white blood cell count, signs of worsening infection that didn't match what Sarah was seeing on the monitors. Someone had altered his chart. Sarah's blood ran cold. She checked the digital timestamp. The changes had been made at 11:47 p.m., just after she'd arrived for her shift. Whoever was doing this was moving fast, setting up the narrative for another natural death. She had to warn Hartman. Had to get him out of this hospital. But before she could move, Dr. Lisa Sharma entered the room. Sarah had never worked closely with Sharma, but she knew the name from her research, one of the 3 attending physicians present for the 11 deaths. "How's Mr. Hartman doing?" Sharma asked, her voice pleasant, professional. "His vitals are stable. Oxygen saturation is at 94%, which is good considering." "I'm seeing some concerning changes in his blood work," Sharma interrupted, pulling up the chart on her tablet. "I think we need to consider transferring him to ICU. As a precaution. ICU. Where patients were more isolated. Where deaths were more expected. Where it would be easier to." Dr. Sharma, with respect, his vitals don't support ICU admission. "He's improving." Sharma's expression hardened slightly. "Sarah, I'm the attending physician. I make the clinical decisions. Prepare Mr. Hartman for transfer. I'd like Dr. Chen to review the case first. Get a second opinion." "That won't be necessary. Hospital protocol for ICU transfers requires." "Sarah." Sharma's voice was sharp now, all pretense of collegiality gone. "Are you refusing to follow my orders?" This was it. The moment of choice. Sarah could back down, follow orders, watch another patient die. Or she could stand her ground and blow everything wide open. She chose. "Yes, I am refusing. Because Mr. Hartman doesn't need ICU, and I think you know that." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Sharma stared at Sarah, and Sarah watched the calculation happen in real time. Was this worth exposing the operation? Was one patient worth the risk? "I see." Sharma's voice was ice. Wait here. I'm calling security. The moment Sharma left the room, Sarah moved fast. She disconnected Mr. Hartman's phone carefully, woke him gently, and explained in rapid whispers that he needed to leave the hospital immediately. She gave him the business card Frank Delacroix had given her and told him to call the number, that someone would help him. Gregory Hartman, confused but sensing genuine fear in Sarah's voice, got dressed and slipped out of the room while Sarah stood watch. Then she called Delacroix. It's happening. Right now. They were going to transfer a patient to ICU, Gregory Hartman, room 4B. I got him out, but they know I'm interfering. Where are you? 4th floor, St. Mary's. Get out. No. Meet me at... The line went dead. Sarah spun around to find Dr. Chen standing behind her, his hand on the phone jack he'd just pulled from the wall. That was foolish, Sarah. It was necessary. You've made this very complicated. Behind him, Patricia Hammond appeared, flanked by 2 security guards Sarah didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said, her voice devoid of the earlier warmth. You've created quite a situation here. Interfering with patient care, making wild accusations, violating HIPAA by contacting families without authorization. Documenting murder, Sarah countered, her hand moving to her pocket. Recording conversations. Gathering evidence of insurance fraud and systematic patient deaths. Patricia's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw Dr. Chen's face go pale. Those are serious allegations, Patricia continued, taking a step closer. Allegations that could destroy your career, your reputation, your freedom, even. Do you understand that helping a patient leave against medical advice, especially one as sick as Mr. Hartman, could be construed as kidnapping? Reckless endangerment. He wasn't sick. You altered his chart to make him appear sick. Just like you did with Eleanor Pembroke, Jennifer Rodriguez, David Brennan. All 11 of them. You're having a breakdown, Dr. Chen said, and Sarah heard the rehearsed quality in his voice again, the same tone he'd used when declaring Mrs. Pembroke's death. The stress of the job, your recent illness, it's affected your judgment. We need to get you help. The security guards moved forward, but Sarah backed toward the nurses' station. Amanda was there, her eyes wide, and Sarah made another split-second decision. Amanda, call 911. Tell them there's an emergency at St. Mary's Hospital. Officer Frank Delacroix, Ohio Department of Insurance, should be contacted immediately. Don't you dare, Patricia snapped at Amanda. But Amanda was already reaching for the phone. One of the security guards lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, and that's when everything erupted. Sarah ran. She didn't think, just moved, through the doors to the stairwell, her feet pounding on the concrete steps as she heard shouting behind her. Down 1 floor, 2, 3. She burst through the ground floor exit and into the parking lot, cold night air burning her lungs. Behind her, the door slammed open. Dr. Sharma and one of the security guards. Sarah sprinted toward the street, toward the lights of the emergency room entrance where there would be witnesses, cameras, people who might help. But she was exhausted, terrified, and they were gaining on her. Then, sirens. 3 police cars came screaming into the parking lot, lights blazing, followed by 2 unmarked sedans. Frank Delacroix emerged from the lead sedan before it had fully stopped, badge held high. Ohio Department of Insurance. Nobody move. The scene that followed was controlled chaos. Police officers swarming the building. Delacroix reading Patricia Hammond her rights while she stood frozen, her face finally showing emotion. Shock, fury, fear. Dr. Chen attempting to walk away casually before being stopped by 2 officers. Sarah collapsed against a police car, her legs finally giving out, and watched it all unfold. Amanda emerged from the building 20 minutes later, escorted by a female officer, and ran to Sarah. They held each other without speaking, 2 nurses who'd witnessed the impossible and survived. The investigation that followed lasted 7 months. Frank Delacroix's team, armed with Sarah's recordings and testimony, obtained warrants to seize all of St. Mary's medical records before they could be destroyed. What they found confirmed Sarah's worst fears and revealed something even more horrifying. The 11 deaths in March 2004 weren't the beginning. They were the acceleration. St. Mary's Hospital had been systematically eliminating high-cost patients since October 2003. March was just when they'd gotten more aggressive, more desperate, as the April insurance audit loomed closer. The total count: 47 patients over 6 months. Dr. Robert Chen, Dr. Lisa Sharma, and Dr. Marcus Webb, the 3 night shift attendings, had all participated. They'd use different methods depending on the patient: injecting air into 4 lines to cause embolisms, administering potassium chloride to stop hearts, or simply disconnecting life support and falsifying records to claim equipment failure. Patricia Hammond had orchestrated everything, tracking which patients were costing the hospital money, selecting targets, and managing the cover-up. She'd paid out over $800,000 in compassionate settlements to families, a fraction of what the hospital would have spent on their continued care. The most damning evidence came from an email recovered from Patricia's deleted files, sent to the hospital's chief financial officer in February 2004. Our cost reduction protocol has saved St. Mary's approximately $3.2 million over the past 4 months. Recommend continuing through Q2 to ensure financial stability before audit. Acceptable risk level maintained. They'd called it a cost reduction protocol. Murder, systematized and quantified. The trials began in March 2005, exactly 1 year after Eleanor Pembroke's death. Patricia Hammond received life in prison without possibility of parole. Dr. Chen, Dr. Sharma, and Dr. Webb each received sentences of 25 years to life. 6 other hospital employees, administrators, a lab technician who'd falsified blood work, 2 more security guards, received various sentences for conspiracy and accessory charges. St. Mary's Hospital declared bankruptcy and closed its doors in June 2005. The building stood empty for 3 years before being demolished. Sarah Mitchell testified at every trial. She recounted finding Mrs. Pembroke, overhearing the conversation in the records room, photographing the logbook, meeting with families, working with Delacroix. She showed the jury her recordings. She named every victim she could remember. The defense attorneys tried to paint her as an unstable, attention-seeking nurse who'd misunderstood medical realities. But the physical evidence, the altered charts, the deleted records, the financial incentives, the email, told the real story. 47 patients had died. 47 families had been paid off and silenced. And it took 1 night shift nurse refusing to look away to stop it. Sarah never worked in a hospital again. She tried, briefly, in 2006. A small clinic in Dayton offered her a position, drawn by her story, her courage. But the moment she put on scrubs and walked into a patient care area, she had a panic attack so severe they had to call an ambulance. Some traumas don't heal. They just become part of who you are. Instead, Sarah became an advocate. She worked with state legislators to pass new hospital oversight laws. She testified before medical boards. She gave talks at nursing schools about the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong, even when, especially when, the people telling you to be quiet are the ones in authority. She stayed in touch with the families, attended memorials, helped several of them file wrongful death lawsuits against St. Mary's defunct insurance carriers. And every year on March 23rd, the anniversary of Eleanor Pembroke's death, Sarah visited the small memorial that had been erected in Cleveland, a simple stone wall with 47 names carved into it. Victims of what the media had called the St. Mary's murders. She'd run her fingers over the names and remember. Harold Mitchum, Sandra Lee, Jennifer Rodriguez, David Brennan, Eleanor Pembroke. All of them. Every single one. People often asked Sarah if she regretted investigating. If she wished she'd just kept her head down and stayed silent. The answer was always the same. Every day, I think about the patients I couldn't save. The ones who died before I understood what was happening. But I also think about Gregory Hartman, and everyone who was admitted to St. Mary's after April 7, 2004. Everyone who lived because we stopped it. That has to be enough. The events at St. Mary's Hospital shocked the medical community and led to sweeping reforms in hospital oversight across Ohio and beyond. But it makes you wonder, how many other hospitals are making cost reduction decisions we'll never know about? What do you think? Could something like this happen at your local hospital? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story made you think twice about the healthcare system, hit that subscribe button. Ward 13 brings you the hospital stories they don't want you to know about every single week. The names have been changed, but the numbers are real. 47 patients. 6 months. One nurse who refused to stay silent. Until next time, stay vigilant.